I'm now joined in studio by Stephanie Wolters from the Institute of Security Studies. Good afternoon to you, and thank you so much indeed for coming through. Let's just get your reaction with what is happening in the DRC.
Well, a lot of things have been happening this week in particular. We saw initially, at the beginning of the week, the return of Jean-Pierre Bemba after 10 years in prison at the International Criminal Court in The Hague. He returned to Kinshasa on Wednesday, and today we have the attempted return by Moise Katumbi, who is another key opposition leader who has been in exile for the last few years.
Yeah, and let's just, get an understanding. First, of course, focusing on Jean-Pierre Bemba. Of course, he was warmly welcomed by some of his supporters in the DRC. What is that saying? I mean, some are basically saying that he is a beacon of hope, a beacon of change. Would you agree?
Well, I think that he is a very viable presidential candidate. In the 10 years that he's been away, his popularity hasn't appeared to have waned too significantly. It's important to say, though, that most Congolese were never convinced that the charges brought against Jean-Pierre Bemba or they didn't support those charges. They were charges for crimes committed in the Central African Republic. Many people interpreted his arrest by the ICC as a way to remove the key political rival of Kabila. So he is still a very viable politician in the DRC. Absolutely. Yeah.
And of course, focusing now on Moise Katumbi, why was he denied access to the country?
Well, he is a political rival of Kabila's, a former governor associated with the ruling party who's turned into an opponent. He faces legal proceedings and legal judgments for a number of different issues, highly politicized court cases that took place there that few people think have much credibility. He went into exile voluntarily to seek medical care and has been told repeatedly by the Congolese government that if he returns, he will be arrested. Now, he knows that, and he has stated publicly on many occasions that he's aware that he will be arrested. So there really isn't any logic in trying to prevent him from arriving in the DRC. But I think, in fact, it's a poor calculation on behalf of the government. They seem to think that if they don't allow him into the country, we won't see the kinds of floods of support that he often has received and the kinds of floods of support that we saw earlier this week in Kinshasa for Jean-Pierre Bemba.
And we do know that the DRC has never known a peaceful transition of power. Is there a reason to start panicking now? More so when one considers the fact that President Kabila has actually refused to commit publicly if he will be contesting or he will send someone on his behalf to contest the elections.
That's right, and you're absolutely right. I think it's not about panicking, it's about looking very clearly at what lies ahead. We have an election that's due to take place on the 23rd of December. A lot needs to happen in the meantime. We still have harassment of political opponents. We don't have an open, free and fair political environment in the DRC. We don't have clarity about Kabila intending to stand. We have issues around the voter machines, about the voters' role. These issues need to be addressed by organizations such as SADC and the African Union immediately. If we have any hope.
Are they even addressing such issues? I mean, there were a lot of questions without answers in terms of what happened in Zimbabwe as to whether SADC has been able to reclaim his capabilities.
I think, yes, absolutely. SADC has been, if anything, publicly supportive of Joseph Kabila. At one of the last meetings, they made a statement saying that the country had made important progress towards the elections. Behind the scenes, we're told that individual SADC heads of state have very clearly given the message that Kabila needs to go. But we need SADC to stand up and say that publicly. We need the pressure on Kabila. We need him to understand that SADC represents not the interests of elites in the region, but populations in the region. And it's the same for the African Union.
Yeah, but in terms of, I mean, as I have said, that he's really playing his cards very close to his chest. He's not saying any much as to whether he will stand for the elections in December. Do you think, because constitutionally it looks like the Constitution is barring him from standing for another term?
No, absolutely. And this has been the case for the last 2 years. Remember, we were meant to have elections in the DRC by the end of 2016. That would have been the end of his second term, and he isn't allowed to have a third mandate. I think that at this point we're unlikely to see an attempt to try and change that constitution through a referendum. Clearly, we don't have that kind of time anymore. And the end of the registration period for presidential candidates is August 8th, and we should know by then whether he himself is standing for his ruling party or whether he has nominated a successor for himself. I think that if he, in fact, is intending to stand again, that changes the game entirely. I think then the election really is called into question, and I think we need to go back to the negotiating table.
But then if he stands, what are the chances of Jean-Pierre Bemba?
Look, we've seen some public opinion polls. It looks like if Kabila stands, or if someone from his ruling party stands, they would each get individually about 19%. Jean-Pierre Bemba is also, according to the latest public opinion polls, at between that 17 and 19. Same for Moise Katumbi and Felix Tshisekedi. Now, one of the ways in which the opposition can win this election, if in fact it's a free and fair one, is if they put forward a unity candidate, or if some of these key players do decide to stand together. And that, I think, will make it very, very difficult for anybody who is anointed by Kabila, or for Kabila for that matter, to win this election in a free and fair contest.
All right, now we have to leave it at that due to time constraints, but thank you so much for coming through, Stephanie. I suppose it's a matter of waiting and see what happens going forward. Thank you so much indeed.
Thank you.
All right, well, there you have